Welcome back. For this deep dive, you've given us some really fascinating source material, ancient texts, commentaries, all connected to the Dhammapada. Our job is to sort of unpack all that.
Yeah, to get to the core insights, the stories behind some foundational teachings, we're essentially traveling back in time using these texts as our guide.
Right, setting the scene in Jetavana during the time of the teacher, the Buddha.
Exactly. And the main players in these particular stories are two groups of monks. You've got the Chabbaggiyabhikkhuvatthu monks, that's a group of 6,
Okay.
and the Sarasavagya monks, a group of 17.
6 versus 17. And, well, let's just say they had some issues. We're going to explore a couple of incidents, how they played out, and importantly, how the teacher responded.
Because these incidents, they might seem small, but they led to very specific monastic rules and some really profound ethical teachings that are still relevant.
Absolutely. So let's dive into the first one. Your sources mention the group of 17 monks preparing their lodgings, their sanasana.
Right, they're setting up their space, getting settled, pretty standard stuff.
You'd think. But then the Chabagya monks, the group of 6, they show up.
They do, and according to the text, they just tell the 17 monks to, well, get out.
Just like that. On what
The
grounds?
seniority. The justification given is simply, we are older.
Huh. We're older, so this spot is ours now. That's bold.
It is, and the 17 monks, they refused.
Yeah, I imagine they would. They'd already done the work, right? Prepared the place.
Exactly. They made that point, we prepared this first. Seems reasonable.
But it didn't end there, did it?
Yeah.
The sources get quite specific about what happened next.
Escalation.
Yes. The text states quite plainly that the Chabagya monks hit the 17 monks. Bhikkhus. This wasn't just arguing, it turned physical.
Wow. Hitting fellow monks, and the reaction of the 17.
It was intense. The sources used strong language. They were terrified of death, maranabhyatajita. They cried out loudly, Mahavirvavisu.
Terrified of death, that really underscores the severity, doesn't it? It wasn't just a minor scuffle. They feared for their lives. Absolutely. That detail, the loud crying born from sheer terror, it really paints a picture.
You could almost hear the commotion.
Oh.
And naturally, the teacher heard this.
Yes, the noise reached him. He asked what was going on, heard the whole story, and his response was crucial.
He laid down a rule, right?
Immediately. Based directly on this incident, he established the Pahordadana Sikapada,
Which is?
a training rule, a precept against hitting others. He declared monks shouldn't do this. Simple as that.
So, direct action leads to a direct rule. But it wasn't just a rule. There was a deeper teaching involved, too.
That's right. He explained the why behind the rule. He taught that monks need to understand this fundamental point. As I am, so are these others. They fear punishment, just like I do. They fear death, just like I do.
The empathy connection.
Precisely. And therefore, recognizing that shared vulnerability, one should not hit others or kill others.
And this idea is summed up in a verse.
Yes, the first key verse from your sources captures it beautifully. All tremble at punishment, all fear death, making oneself the analogy, one should not hit or kill.
Making oneself the analogy, atana upamakatva. That phrase feels central. Use your own experience as the measure.
Exactly. It's the bedrock of this ethical teaching. And the commentary digs into this verse even more.
Okay, what does it add?
Well, it explains all tremble at punishment means, beings get scared when punishment is directed at them. And all fear death, that's pretty self-explanatory. The fear of ceasing to exist is almost universal.
Almost universal. You hesitated there.
Yes. Because this is where the commentary throws in a curveball. It says that statement, all tremble, or by extension, all fear death, in this context, actually has some exceptions.
Exceptions to fearing death. That's surprising.
It is. The commentary uses an analogy like how when the king's drum sounds for an assembly, maybe the chief ministers don't have to come. There can be exceptions to general rules.
Okay, interesting analogy. So who are the exceptions to fearing death or trembling in this context?
According to the source, there are 4 specific types of beings. The well-bred elephant, the well-bred horse, the well-bred bull, and the 4th one is the arahant, a fully awakened being.
Okay, the animals. Maybe I can see that. Bred for courage, maybe they don't show fear in the face of opponents. Was that the idea?
That's essentially what the commentary suggests for them, yes. It says their self-identity view is strong, so they don't really perceive an opponent as a threat capable of harming them. A kind of supreme confidence, perhaps?
Right. But the arahant, that seems different. Why wouldn't an arahant fear death?
The commentary gives a really profound reason. It says the arahant doesn't fear death because they've completely abandoned the view of a separate, permanent self. the sakayati.
No self-identity.
Right, so if there's no fixed self perceived as existing independently, then there's no self to be subject to death. The whole basis for that fear dissolves.
Wow. That's a fundamental shift in perspective. So the animals don't fear because their sense of self is maybe too strong, too focused on their own power,
According to this commentary, yes.
while the arahant doesn't fear because the very notion of that kind of self has been seen through and let go of.
Exactly. It's a fascinating contrast provided by the commentary, showing different routes to a similar outcome, but rooted in entirely different understandings of reality.
That adds incredible depth. But even with these, let's face it, pretty rare exceptions,
Very rare.
the core teaching remains the same for, well, for everyone else.
Absolutely. The practical takeaway is, making oneself the analogy, one should not hit or kill. Use your own fear, your own aversion to pain as the guide for how you treat others.
And this teaching, it had an impact.
Yes, the sources mention that after this teaching, many people attained significant spiritual insights, like stream entry. It clearly struck a chord.
Okay, so that covers the first incident. Hitting over lodgings leads to a rule and a teaching based on shared fear. But then there's a second incident in your sources.
There is. And the texts explicitly state it rose from the same reason as the previous one. So again, conflict over lodging, likely involving hitting or the threat of it.
These Chabbaggiyabhikkhu monks seem persistent. What did they do differently this time?
This time, the specific action mentioned is that they raise their palm spears, talasatika ujirsu, against the group of 17.
Palm spears. What does that mean exactly? Like threatening with their hands?
It likely implies a threatening gesture, maybe holding the hand rigidly, like a spear point, or perhaps even striking with the palm edge, a clear act of intimidation or aggression.
Another escalation, or at least a variation. And the teacher's response.
Similar pattern. Heard the noise, asked what happened, was told about this specific action.
And another rule followed.
Yes, this led to the Talasatika Sikapada, a rule specifically against this act of raising the palm spear, against making that kind of threatening gesture.
Okay, rule number 2 from these conflicts. And did this also lead to a teaching?
It did. Again, the teacher used the analogy of self, but with a slight, very important variation. He explained that monks should understand, as I am, so are others. They fear punishment. That part's the same. And as life is dear to me, so is life dear to them. Therefore, one should not hit or kill.
Life is dear to me, so is life dear to them. That adds another layer. Let's hear the verse for this one.
The second verse goes, all tremble at punishment, life is dear to all. Making oneself the analogy, one should not hit or kill.
So very similar.
Yeah.
But life is dear to all replaces all fear death. What's the significance of that change?
It shifts the focus slightly. It's not just about avoiding the negative fear and death, but also recognizing the positive value that beings place on their own existence. Life itself is precious.
And the commentary picks up on this.
It does. It explicitly notes the difference, explaining that life is dear to all means just that beings cherish their lives. With, again, one exception.
Let me guess. The arahant.
You got it. The commentary says the arahant is upekakova regarding life or death.
Upekako.
Indifferent. Not in a cold way, but in a way that's free from clinging to life or fearing death. It aligns perfectly with having abandoned the self-view. There's no self for whom life is dear in that attached, grasping sense.
So the attachment is gone.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And does the commentary say anything else about the second verse?
It basically says the rest is the same as before, meaning the explanation about trembling at punishment and those 4 exceptions, the elephant, horse, bull, and arahant, still applies.
Okay, so it ties it all together. We have the 2 incidents, same monks, similar conflict,
Right. Seems like lodging was a real point of contention.
leading to 2 specific rules targeting the actions, hitting and threatening. But the bigger outcome is this core teaching, atana upamakatva, making oneself the analogy.
Exactly, and presented in 2 subtly different ways. First, based on shared fear of pain and death, don't cause what you fear yourself.
And second, based on shared fear, but also the shared value placed on life itself, don't destroy what is precious to others, just as it's precious to you.
It combines the avoidance of harm with the recognition of inherent worth.
And those commentary notes about the exceptions, the arahant, and the animals, they just add this layer of complexity, showing that while the basic principle of empathy works for most, there are states where fear and attachment operate differently.
It acknowledges nuance without undermining the fundamental ethical guideline for everyday interaction.
Which really brings this ancient wisdom right back to us, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How does thinking about my own fear, my own sense that my life is valuable, how does that help me relate to you, to anyone?
It's the foundation of empathy, isn't it? Understanding another's potential suffering or valuing of life through the lens of our own immediate experience. It's practical ethics, born from real conflict.
So we start this deep dive looking at squabbles over rooms in a monastery thousands of years ago.
Yeah, pretty mundane beginnings in a way.
And following the threads in your sources, we've arrived at these universal principles about shared vulnerability, the value of life, and the power of using ourselves as the basis for compassion.
It shows how timeless these core human and ethical questions really are.
So the final thought to leave you with, maybe, if using your own fear of suffering and your own love for your life, as that analogy can stop you from hitting someone or even threatening them, what other choices, what other actions or maybe inactions in your own life could be guided differently if you consistently applied that same simple analogy of self?